There's a glass sitting in millions of refrigerators right now, filled with something that looks like slightly thick, slightly sour milk. And almost nobody drinking it has any idea that what's actually inside that glass is one of the most concentrated doses of living organisms you will ever willingly put into your body. Not dozens of them, not hundreds. In a single cup of real kefir, you are swallowing anywhere from 10 to 50 different species of bacteria and yeast, working together, alive, and about to start negotiating directly with your gut, your immune system, and, as we're about to show you, even your brain. Most people who drink kefir do it because someone told them it's good for digestion. Take a sip, make a face at the tang, and move on with their day, never realizing that what they just drank sets off one of the most complex biological chain reactions of anything they'll consume today. So today, we're taking that glass apart completely. We're going to walk through exactly what kefir does the moment it hits your mouth, what happens to it as it travels through your stomach, your intestines, your bloodstream, which organs actually benefit from it, which ones benefit the most, whether it's better in the morning or any time of day, how much you actually need, and the one mistake almost everyone makes that quietly cancels out most of the benefit before it even has a chance to happen. Welcome to the Wonder Lab, the channel where we turn the things sitting in your kitchen into a laboratory of curiosity. If you've ever wondered whether kefir is actually worth the hype, or just another wellness trend riding on a strange-sounding name, stay until the end, because the science here is stranger and more impressive than almost anyone expects. Let's start with what kefir actually is, because most people get this part wrong immediately. Kefir is not just fermented milk. It's not yogurt with a different name. Kefir is produced using something called kefir grains, small, gelatinous clusters that look a little like tiny cauliflower florets, made up of proteins, lipids, and sugars, all bound together into a living structure that hosts an entire ecosystem of bacteria and yeast living in symbiotic balance with each other. When those grains are added to milk and left to ferment, that entire microbial community gets to work, consuming lactose, producing lactic acid, releasing carbon dioxide, generating a small amount of alcohol, and synthesizing a long list of bioactive compounds along the way. That's the first reason kefir is fundamentally different from yogurt. Yogurt is typically made using just one or two bacterial strains. Kefir can contain dozens, sometimes involving both bacteria and yeast working in the same batch, which means the diversity of what you're consuming isn't even in the same category. So what actually happens the moment kefir enters your body? It starts in your mouth and stomach, where the first wave of those live microorganisms meets your own digestive environment. Here's something that surprises a lot of people. Kefir's organisms are remarkably resilient to stomach acid, far more so than many other probiotic sources. A meaningful percentage of them survive the trip through your stomach intact, which matters enormously, because a probiotic that dies before it reaches your intestines isn't doing much for you at all. This is one of kefir's biggest advantages over many commercial probiotic supplements. The organisms in kefir have been surviving this exact journey, generation after generation, for literally thousands of years. Once they reach your small intestine, and eventually your colon, that's where the real work begins. And this is where we need to talk about your gut microbiome, because this is ground zero for almost everything kefir does to the rest of your body. Your gut is home to trillions of microorganisms, forming an ecosystem so complex that scientists sometimes refer to it as an organ in its own right. That ecosystem does far more than just digest food. It manufactures certain vitamins. It trains and regulates your immune system. It produces short-chain fatty acids that feed the cells lining your intestinal wall. And increasingly, research shows it communicates directly with your brain. When kefir's live organisms arrive in your gut, they don't just pass through, they interact with the bacteria already living there. They compete with harmful, pathogenic bacteria for space and resources, effectively crowding them out. They help produce compounds that lower the pH of your gut environment, making it less hospitable for the kinds of bacteria linked to digestive discomfort and inflammation. And they stimulate the growth of your own beneficial bacterial populations, essentially reinforcing an ecosystem that was likely already there, just working below its potential. This is why kefir is so strongly associated with improved digestion, reduced bloating, more regular bowel movements, and for many people, a noticeable improvement in symptoms linked to lactose intolerance. This last point deserves special attention because it surprises almost everyone who hears it for the first time. Kefir's fermentation process breaks down a significant portion of the lactose in milk before you ever drink it. The bacteria essentially pre-digest it for you. On top of that, the live enzymes present in kefir continue helping your body process any remaining lactose after you drink it. That's why a meaningful number of people who react badly to regular milk can tolerate kefir with little to no discomfort at all. But digestion is really just the entry point. Let's talk about where kefir goes from there, because the effects reach far beyond your gut. Let's talk about your immune system, because this connection is stronger than most people realize. Roughly 70% of your entire immune system is housed in tissue lining your gastrointestinal tract. That's not a small statistic. That's the majority of your body's immune machinery, sitting directly next to the same environment kefir's organisms are actively reshaping every time you drink it. When your gut microbiome is diverse and balanced, immune cells stationed in that tissue receive more consistent, more accurate signals about what does and doesn't belong in your body. Research on kefir specifically has shown it can stimulate the activity of certain immune cells, increase the production of specific antibodies, and help modulate inflammatory responses, essentially helping your immune system stay alert without becoming overactive, which is exactly the balance you want. An immune system that's too passive leaves you vulnerable to infection. One that's too aggressive starts attacking your own tissue. Kefir appears to help nudge that balance towards stability. Now let's move to an organ almost nobody connects with a glass of fermented milk: your brain. Over the last 2 decades, one of the most fascinating developments in neuroscience has been the discovery of what researchers call the gut-brain axis, a direct communication pathway running between your digestive system and your central nervous system, largely mediated through the vagus nerve, but also through immune signaling and the various compounds your gut bacteria produce. Certain strains of bacteria commonly found in kefir have been shown to influence the production of neurotransmitters, including serotonin, a huge percentage of which is actually produced in the gut, not the brain, despite most people assuming the opposite. Some kefir-associated strains also appear to influence GABA production, a neurotransmitter closely tied to relaxation and the regulation of anxiety. This is still an active, evolving area of research, and nobody is claiming kefir is a treatment for anxiety or depression. But the mechanistic link between what's happening in your gut and how your brain regulates mood is no longer speculative. It's measurable, and kefir sits directly at the intersection of that research. Let's talk about your bones next, because this is a benefit almost nobody associates with a fermented dairy drink. Kefir made from dairy milk is naturally rich in calcium, and depending on the strain composition, some kefir varieties also contain vitamin K2, a nutrient that plays a critical role in directing calcium to where it actually belongs, inside your bones, instead of accumulating where it shouldn't, like your arteries. Some population studies have found associations between regular fermented dairy consumption and better bone mineral density, particularly in older adults, an age group where maintaining bone strength becomes an increasingly urgent priority. Then there's your skin, and this connection runs through the same gut pathway we've already been discussing. Chronic low-grade gut inflammation has been linked in a growing body of research to inflammatory skin conditions, including acne and eczema, in some individuals. By helping regulate gut inflammation and supporting a healthier microbial balance, kefir may indirectly support skin health as well, not as a guaranteed fix, but as one more piece of a much larger picture where your gut and your skin are far more connected than most skincare routines ever account for. And then there's your metabolic health, your blood sugar regulation, and your cardiovascular system. Some research has found that regular kefir consumption is associated with modest improvements in insulin sensitivity and more stable post-meal blood sugar responses, likely tied to how it affects gut bacteria involved in glucose metabolism. On the cardiovascular side, certain bioactive peptides generated during kefir's fermentation process have shown mild blood pressure-lowering effects in some studies, alongside potential benefits for cholesterol profiles. None of this makes kefir a substitute for medical treatment of these conditions, but as a consistent dietary habit, the direction of the evidence is clearly favorable. So, by now you might be wondering, when should you actually drink this? Morning, or does it not matter? Here's the honest answer: because there's a lot of misinformation floating around on this exact question. There is no strong scientific evidence that kefir must be consumed first thing in the morning to get its benefits. What actually matters far more than timing is consistency. Drinking it regularly, day after day, so your gut microbiome receives a steady, repeated supply of these beneficial organisms and compounds, rather than an occasional, random dose. That said, there are a few practical reasons morning consumption has become a popular habit, and they're worth mentioning. Drinking kefir on a relatively empty stomach may allow its live organisms to move through your stomach acid more efficiently, since there's less competition from a large mixed meal sitting alongside it. Some people also find that starting the day with a source of protein and probiotics helps regulate appetite and blunt cravings later in the morning, likely tied to that gut-to-brain satiety signaling we talked about earlier. But if mornings don't work for your routine, drinking kefir at any other point in the day, or even splitting a serving between morning and evening, still delivers essentially the same core benefits. The organism doesn't check a clock. Your gut does not care what time it is. What it cares about is whether you show up consistently. Now, how much should you actually drink? Most research showing measurable benefits uses somewhere between 1/2 cup and 2 cups per day, roughly 100 to 500 milliliters, depending on the study and the outcome being measured. If you're new to kefir, it's worth starting small, around 1/4 to 1/2 cup daily, because introducing this much live bacterial activity into your gut all at once can cause temporary bloating or digestive adjustment in some people during the first week or two. That's not a sign kefir is bad for you. That's your gut microbiome recalibrating to a new, more diverse population of organisms. It typically settles within a short period. Here's the mistake almost everyone makes, though, the one that quietly cancels out a huge portion of the benefit before it even has a chance to happen. Heat kills live cultures. If you're adding kefir to hot coffee, blending it into a smoothie with ingredients straight out of a hot pan, or heating it up because you prefer it warm, you are actively destroying the very organisms responsible for everything we just walked through. Kefir needs to stay cold, or at most reach room temperature, to preserve its live cultures. This single detail is the difference between drinking an actual probiotic and drinking flavored, fermented milk with none of the biological activity left inside it. The second detail worth knowing is the difference between store-bought and homemade kefir, because it genuinely matters. Many commercial kefir products are pasteurized after fermentation to extend shelf life, a process that can significantly reduce or even eliminate the live cultures the product is being marketed for in the first place. Always check the label for phrases like live and active cultures, and ideally look for a strain count or CFU number listed on the packaging. Homemade kefir, made using real kefir grains fermented in milk at home, typically contains a far higher and more diverse concentration of live organisms than most store-bought versions. And it's also, notably, far cheaper over time, since the same grains can be reused indefinitely. It's also worth knowing that kefir isn't a modern wellness invention. This is a fermentation tradition that stretches back well over 1,000 years, believed to have originated in the Caucasus Mountains, where it was passed down for generations long before anyone understood what a probiotic even was, let alone had the tools to study gut bacteria under a microscope. Once again, this is a pattern you'll notice across almost everything we cover on this channel. Traditional food wisdom, developed through generations of lived experience, quietly arriving at conclusions that modern science only caught up to centuries later. So let's bring this all together. What you're actually doing every time you drink a glass of kefir is introducing a small, living ecosystem into your body, one that interacts with your gut, competes with harmful bacteria, strengthens your intestinal lining, communicates with your immune system, influences neurotransmitter production tied to your brain, supports your bones through calcium and vitamin K2, and may even extend its influence to your skin, your blood sugar, and your cardiovascular system. Not through a single dramatic mechanism, but through a slow, repeated, cumulative signal that your body responds to over weeks and months of consistent use. It's not about drinking it at exactly 7 in the morning. It's not about a single miracle dose. It's about consistency, keeping it cold, choosing a version with genuinely live cultures, and giving your gut the time it needs to actually respond to that signal. If this changed the way you think about that glass sitting in your fridge, hit subscribe to the Wonder Lab. because this is exactly the kind of everyday science we dig into here, the stuff hiding in plain sight in your own kitchen. Drop a like if you learned something new today, and tell us in the comments if you already drink kefir, and if you do, what changes you actually noticed once you made it a habit. If you know someone who drinks kefir every day but has no idea what it's actually doing inside their body, send them this video. They're going to want to see this. See you in the next experiment.